Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pursue the Hunt Live. I'm your host, Mike Friesen, and I'm here with a special guest today, Tony Warriner. He is a good personal friend of mine and also the pastor of Evangel Chapel downtown. So today what we're going to be talking about is Tony and I actually shared a hunt together a few years ago, so we'll be talking about that. It was a goat and sheep hunting trip, and then we're also going to talk about his book that he's recently released, and we'll go over that a little bit with you. So welcome here, Tony.
It's good to be here. Super good to be here.
Thanks for being on the show today. So let's talk sheep and goat hunting. So a few years ago, it was actually 2017.
Was that 3 years ago?
Yeah, I was looking back on Dropbox.
Crazy.
And it was 3 years ago. So Tony and I, what we did is we planned a hunt, and it was a goat sheep hunt. It was going to be late season, beginning of October, for a week or so, and up here in northern BC. And yeah, so what did you think about like the overall experience? Like, was that your first backcountry hunt?
Well, first time actually officially hunting goat and sheep for sure. I hadn't ever experienced that. I spent a lot of growing up years on the coast. So it was mostly deer hunting, muleys, and no, it was amazing. We were up in some pretty beautiful country.
Yeah,
the whole experience was phenomenal.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, being late season, I was a little bit worried with. I had been up there before, and I mean, man, it could be fall when you go to sleep, and winter when you wake up, which is a little bit about what we experienced. So we went in on the quads a couple hours, and then we hiked in, crossed the river, set up camp, immediately got onto the goats, which was pretty exciting too. We could even start glassing them right up on the side of the mountain there too.
Yeah. I remember being shocked about the length of the days, because probably in the time I've been in Fort St. John, most of the hunting I've done here is, like August.
Right.
Open season in August or whatever. So you're out there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it can be a really long day where we had this little window.
Right.
And then you and I find ourselves tucked into a tent. I mean, for a long night, which was interesting. But
yeah, we had a decent fire.
Yeah,
we built a good fire because we crossed the river, and then we glassed those goats, and we decided to go right up the ridge. Basically, we dropped as much weight as we could. We went up that steep ridge.
Yeah.
And I told you, I said, Tony, we're going to go up a goat trail, and we literally climbed up a goat trail.
No, it was a very cool experience. Very cool experience.
So what was your experience in like physically preparedness? Like how did you feel physically prepared for that type of hunt?
I felt at that point like I was kind of at the top of my game in terms of physical shape. So no problems there at all. No problems there at all. I do remember you lagging behind a little bit.
I was gonna say, for all that salt and pepper that's in that beard.
I felt pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
For all that salt and pepper that's in that beard.
To be fair,
you put up a good climb.
You were packing a lot of the heavy gear. Like you had the spotting scope on the back and a bunch of other stuff. So
yeah.
But no, I felt really good. It had been a while. Like it's funny. I grew up in Bella Coola, which is, if you know where that is, Williams Lake West, 6-hour drive. And my brothers and I, two brothers, we love doing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And they actually, the people down there, the New Hulk Nation, they nicknamed us the Mountain Goats because we just love doing this kind of stuff. So it kind of felt like going back there again. Like literally, I remember one point, I was probably 16 or 17. My brothers are younger than me, but there was a particular bluff as you're driving into Bella Coola that you always saw mountain sheep. And one summer we thought, let's just go up there and see if we can get as close as we can to these sheep. But we had a couple friends with us, totally out of shape. But we got all the way up there, and then we realized once we got up there, we had to come back down, and it was literally bluff after bluff after bluff, 300-foot drops all the way down. And I thought, there's no way these guys are going to get down. But we ended up getting everybody back safe. But anyways, it took me back to those days. I was like, this is awesome.
So it wasn't unfamiliar, really.
Oh, I loved it. And then coming up, so we came up. This was a really cool moment. We came up out of the tree line there when you and I were hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And right above us on a sheer cliff is a goat sitting there. just looking at us.
Yeah. There was a group of nannies there.
Right.
Yep.
But it was questionable whether we could get to that point.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean, we did figure there were one or two dry nannies in there, so we were kind of like, oh, I don't know, we should hold out. But yeah, when we actually did get up there, we looked, and it would have been really sketchy
Oh yeah.
getting something out there. It's there's some people that say when the sheep hunting stops, the goat hunting begins, right? Because you and I both saw like those goats,
Oh my goodness.
they would plaster themselves to that cliff on the other side of the draw.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, it's
and
insane.
they would just meander
Yeah.
on the sides of those cliffs. So
Yeah.
we knew it would be a haul. So okay, so day one, we come back off the ridge after seeing the goats, which was super cool. Long night, we wake up, and there's like a few inches of snow on the ground at the
Yeah.
bottom of the mountain.
Yeah.
And it was
Well,
it
and
was-
which
it
and
was
this
a
is
little
another
defeating.
this is another reason why your pack was so heavy, because you had the foresight to think we should pack hip waders, which honestly I was like, I've never packed hip waders on a hunt ever, and I was like, you're crazy, man, to be packing these on your back, and I had mine on my back. But yeah, the next day we went right up the draw, and the draw is so narrow and so treacherous. I'll never forget the images in my mind of these cliffs, and it's snowing,
and the
it's,
layers.
yeah, just beautiful, stark contrast in colors, and misty, and it was just like an epic moment.
Mhm.
And we are in this little draw, rushing little river with our hip waders on, which I was super thankful for at that point. Couldn't have gone up the draw without the hip waders. But I'll never forget coming around a corner, and I mean, it's just like, this is harsh. These are harsh conditions.
Yeah.
And come around this corner, and there's this nanny with a couple goats on the side, just looking
Right.
at us.
Yep.
And that, I mean, obviously we were looking for the billy goat out there, but those moments just made it for me. I was just like, wow.
And that's the thing about hunting is it's not just about the killing, right? Like hunting is that whole aspect of fair chase, and outwitting that animal in their environment. And I mean, when you look at a goat's environment, I mean, just being able to physically handle that environment, let alone, duping a mountain goat,
Totally.
is another thing. So when you get to see game in general, like a mountain goat or a sheep that's maybe not legal or a ewes or whatever, it's super cool because you're just, that you're a guest in that environment, right? And just to appreciate the, like you say, the sheerness of the cliffs and all that. And then so after we saw the nanny and kids, we come around a corner and there's this waterfall, which we did a lot of e-scouting, and Google Earth can only show you so much. Definitely doesn't depict waterfalls, but it was like it was a little bit defeating, to be honest, because I thought we could just go up this draw, and then there was a bowl at the end that we could glass and stuff, and I was like, oh well, here's our turnaround point, but
yeah. So
but it wasn't, was it?
Well, like I said, these are my growing up years. I'm back there again, and we used to go. My brothers and I we lived, like, Bella Coola is all about mountains. So you basically have 8,000-foot peaks with a narrow, maybe at times a kilometer wide valley.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brothers and I would literally, this is what we would do on our days off. We would just go out the backyard and then just start climbing, and so those kind of draws and stuff. I'm not saying we were being safe. Like, my mom would literally, we come back and we had a little 35 millimeter camera. We come back with these pictures of my brothers and I standing at the top of 300-foot drops. And I didn't even think about it at the time, but she told us years later, she's like, I lost so much sleep anytime you guys took off. But I saw this, so I saw this draw, and I'm like, and I think I said to I'm like, we can do that for sure. Let's just, I mean, I probably should think that stuff through a bit better, because if we would have dropped in there,
well, the thing
it would have
is
been
like,
a little cold.
one of us would have had to back the other person out, because there wasn't even going to be a helicopter that could come and long line us out of there.
Oh man!
But I think we have a video clip
nice.
of this excursion here. We'll just do that. So, seems we run into a bit of a snag. Yeah. we're not sure if we can get around this here, so we did just see a nanny and a kid, but unfortunately that's not very ethical to shoot a nanny with a kid for obvious reasons. But we are now at a crossroads, so stay tuned. So that was before the next clip that we'll see here. So let's see what happened in the next clip.
I just got to say, I love the beard.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
You got to get that back.
Let's roll that next clip. So against better judgment, Pastor Tony has decided to ascend the waterfall. It's looking okay, but it'd be interesting if we got something up here, how you're gonna get it down. Yeah, there's the creek down there. Yeah, so that was only about a third, like halfway-ish where I was. Tony was about another third at least. But then once we got near the top, we had to skirt around the shale slide. Yeah. And then with our packs on, we had to make about a 6-foot leap and grab onto a tree so that we didn't fall backwards. So anyways,
that's a classic Warriner move. You don't think about the end, you just start.
Yeah, you just figure it out. So we made it up there. We got back on the goat trail, went up to the split. By this point, it took us a lot longer than we expected to get even to the split. And I thought, man, we don't have a tent with us. We're going to need to get back. The snow was getting deeper. It was kind of just this, October weather, right?
Well, and the short days to boot. Like, you don't have a lot of time.
No.
It's basically a 7-hour hunt.
Yeah. So then we decided to turn back. We came back down the creek, and but I brought rope for us to go back down. So we kind of did a little bit of a Bear Grylls rappel
that's right.
back down, which honestly felt a lot safer.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
And then we got back down. But it definitely is one of those moments where you also realize how small you are. Where, the Rocky Mountains is a place where there isn't any forgiveness, right? You have to calculate your moves, because even with the inReach I had, we were in a bowl that, who knows what the air currents were like. I don't even know if a helicopter could have even long lined us out of there. So it's you have to make those calculated decisions and stuff. But, so we backed out of there. We decided to pack up camp because with the snow now melting, we knew that river that we crossed by foot was going to come up. And we thought, well, we better get back across that river. So we got back across that, got back on the quads, went back to the holiday trailer where our base camp was, which was really nice to have a hot meal. Which honestly,
we shouldn't tell everybody that. We should make them think that we were in a tent.
No.
It was like, I remember actually feeling a tad bit guilty because I knew everybody back home thought, we're in the mountains. It's minus 20.
Yeah.
We were in your holiday trailer eating sidekicks.
Having a beer. But so the next day we woke up, hopped right back on the quads, went to a different place up the trail where I had been before, looking more for sheep, was more of a sheep area. And then we saw some monstrous grizzly tracks. You remember those?
Yeah, yeah.
And we ended up actually following those grizzly tracks because they were on the trail. But we never did see them.
No.
But I could put my boot in his print. So
honestly,
that was daunting.
I was hoping to get a view on him. Again, back to the whole Bella Coola days. It reminded me a lot. That hunt reminded me a lot of those days because of the mountains and stuff.
Yeah.
But we had just all kinds of grizzly bear encounters down there. So it would have been interesting.
Well, and I think
some good footage, some good shots.
Oh yeah, we got tons of great pictures, and I mean for me too, I just love being out in the wilderness and being out somewhere where you're the guest and you feel like you're the smallest and at the bottom of the food chain. There's something really raw about that you can't get it unless you're actually out there. And it's just, for me also too, it's, a bit of like a spiritual experience as
Oh
well.
man, yeah.
And I'll remember though, going back to the first day when we were hiking up from the quads down to the river. I'm trying to be a little bit quiet because I'm like, oh, maybe there's going to be a moose that comes out or,
Yeah.
something like that. And there's Tony behind me singing one of the songs out of the
Was
Bible.
I singing?
Yeah,
Oh man,
you were actually singing it.
Mighty Hunter Tony singing.
But it was good.
Well, it was interesting. Like now that you say that, I'd actually. So our church, we had been kind of emphasizing it's good to memorize scripture sometimes, and so I'd actually memorized a couple. And one of them is Psalm 24, and it says, "Who may ascend the hill of the Lord?" And I've heard that my whole life, and sermons or whatever. But you're back in the mountains like that, and it just connected with me. I'm like, this is God's domain, and here we are ascending it. Or another one is Psalm 8, or maybe it's Psalm 24 again, but it says the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And there's definitely the sense of, I don't know, I can honestly tell you, in that particular trip, I've never been so like overwhelmed by just the majesty of creation and the awesomeness of it, and you feel so small, and kind of realizing that it's a reflection of God, that you can't really, like, this is my own opinion, you can't confine him to a building.
Yeah.
Like, he literally needs the whole earth. The earth is his sanctuary, so
well, and
it was amazing on that front.
Well, and for me too, like that's the part of the reason why I really do get out once a year, just to like unplug and reconnect. Where there isn't the hustle bustle of the emails and the phones going off and everything else that gets in the way from that connection. And then being able to just go in there, and like some mornings you don't even go out and hunt. You get up and you have breakfast, and you're just sitting out, and you're just it's like you can't even imagine the panoramic picture. Like I try to take a couple panoramics with my phone, but it never does it justice.
Honestly,
to be out there.
My son-in-laws, they all know that for me, hunting is not really so much about the kill. Like it's nice to get to that point. Like we didn't actually bag anything on that trip, but for me, I was like, that's fine. It was a complete win. I just love I don't think there's any better way to center yourself, body, soul, and spirit, than just walking a poplar forest or climbing a hill or whatever. It's so centering. So my kids know that when we go on hunting trips, I automatically turn into a mystic. Like I just get in a steadier, quieter rhythm. It feels like my eyes are open to really see. You're out of the busyness and hustle and bustle. You're not numb anymore. You kind of come awake. Yeah. Spiritually come awake. But I love it. It's awesome. Yeah.
So 2 questions. What's the one thing that you took away from the trip? Like one thing that you learned? And the second one is what was the highlight? So what was the one thing you took away that you learned, like being out in the wilderness maybe or something? And what was the highlight of the trip?
Honestly, I know I'm a pastor, and so maybe people think you automatically spiritualize things, but for me that was probably more than any other trip. There was a spiritual component to it, and I think it was partly because I kind of had some scripture in me, and so I was able to kind of pull it out. And there was a moment when we were quadding up to, it was like a 60-kilometer quad ride. Yeah, it was back in. And you were in front of me and I was in the back, and I was just kind of running off a few different Psalms that I had in my mind. But I had this moment where I think you stopped and turned around and you're like, "What are you doing back there?" And I said, I'm just quoting scripture or whatever. But I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of God seen in creation and the majesty of God seen in creation that I could hardly hold it together. And that was a new experience for me. But I came back from that saying, as a pastor and as a spiritual leader, going, we got to make that connection. Like there's so much more. Don't just go out and have a hunting trip and have a great time. If you have a relationship with God, bring that into it, because you're going to find yourself with margin. You're going to be sitting with a spotting scope for hours. Like there's an opportunity here to actually really refresh yourself. We already get refreshed in that environment, but to spiritually revitalize at the same time. So that would be the one thing I think that I appreciated probably the most, I think, out of that trip. And what was the other question? The highlight of the... Yeah. In my mind, okay? This is going to be a funny picture, but in my mind, you and I are sitting around the fire at night, and you have this red big beard.
It was bushy.
You looked like a hobbit. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it was just like, and there was a moment where I think you might have even thrown out a line from The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, and I was just like, wow, we're just like in this epic moment. You couldn't help but feel, I love this about these kind of moments, is you feel like you're stepping into a bigger story.
Yeah.
And but I'll never forget that. I think we were hanging around the fire. It was a cold night, so below -10.
Yeah.
And the stars are out. It's getting dark. It's only 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever. That was pretty cool. But that tells you where I go. I just love those moments that are created on trips like that.
I think one of the quirky moments for me was you slept with earplugs in, and I was like, "Why are you sleeping with earplugs in?" And he's like, "Oh, it's so I can't hear what's creeping up to the tent." And I'm like, "Cool, so I won't sleep with earplugs in, and I'll have my rifle nicely tucked in right here, just in case." And then, of course, yeah, sure. Like, I mean, yeah. So I love how you just like, yeah, Mike, you got that.
My wife hates it because she knows if we ever go backcountry backpacking, she knows I will have earplugs in. I don't want to hear anything. And she's, meanwhile,
ignorance is bliss, right?
Oh, what really gets me though is when she bangs. I remember this happened one time we were in Montana in the mountains, and she wakes me up in the middle of the night, and she's like, "There's something outside," and I'm like, "Why did you tell me that? I didn't want to know that. I just wanted to sleep through it." It ended up being a mountain goat, by the way.
Nice.
It wasn't a grizzly or anything, but yeah. Anyways,
it's always nice to hear the clip clop of hooves, because when you hear the clip clop of hooves, you know it's not padded feet.
Well, I didn't hear the clip clop of hooves at first. I just heard this kind of mewing sound. In my mind, it was like sow grizzly and cubs. We are toast. Like, what do you even do right now?
Yeah.
It wasn't a hunting trip, so I didn't have a rifle or anything. But then you could hear the hooves on a.
And I mean, it was nice to finish off the trip in the hot springs.
Oh,
like let's not lie about that, because there was snow on the ground. It was actually snowing when we went and drove up to the hot springs. And it was just, that was the cherry on top for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's
now I want to go there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's make this happen.
Let's see. Okay. Let's get to this book here. So
sure.
Right here, we've got
I'm impressed
Boondock
you brought a copy.
I even have my bookmark in it. Like, I'm actually reading it. So Boondock Church. Let's talk about that. Who's it kind of marketing to? Like, what's your audience?
Well, I published the book just here back in January, and the target is definitely first and foremost small towns.
Okay.
So I kind of realized there was a bit of a niche in I guess you could say church growth market or whatever, where the small town was overlooked, and that actually tends to be a bit of just the way our culture goes. We gravitate to the urban centers, not to the small town rural settings. So I wanted to write a book that was directed at to the small town, but specifically to the church in the small town. And so I was kind of thinking of the guy that's sitting in a small town. There is no church. He wants to start one, and I thought I'm going to put together a hacker's guide so he can get from no church to maybe even a thriving church. Because this isn't about small churches per se. Mm-hmm. It's about having a sort of an impact in growing church, like Evangel's been over the last few years, in a smaller setting.
Sweet. Okay, so let's go. So I know you and I have had conversations before, and you're like, yeah, I'm pretty nervous about the book launch. Like, I'm really interested to see what other pastors are going to say when they read this, because there's some controversial stuff in there that they might call me out on. Like, so elaborate on that a little bit. Maybe like a couple of points.
Oh my goodness.
Like,
and you're not going to edit this afterwards?
Well, and I'll be honest, like, I'm reading it and it's pretty raw. It's actually a really good read. So,
well, I tried to be as raw and unfiltered as possible all the way through, and ended up actually taming it quite a bit. I let my dad read it early on. He's a pastor in Dawson Creek, has been for many years. I have huge respect for my mom and dad. And I said, Dad, I just gave him a sheet of papers. I said, have a read through, tell me what you think. And he's like, you're going to get kicked out of your church, basically. And I'm like, really? What are the issues? Just kind of pointed out a few things. But one of the things that kind of comes across as an edge, and it's an intentional edge, is is I kind of speak the language of the culture throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's written to the small town, kind of Hicksville, redneck kind of country or whatever, boondocks. So I kind of use a lot of vernacular in it. And I always say never descend into oil field necessarily talk. If you're from the oil field, I don't mean that as a slam, but try to keep it in farmer land a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a lot of you won't find a lot of Christian books that will kind of walk down that trail. But I felt it was important because I think one of the things in the church is, especially in the small town, is you got to speak the language of the culture. And a lot of times we bring this intellectual kind of university language into the small town. It doesn't work. You got to actually engage the culture. So hunt big game if you're in a place like Fort St. John,
Yeah.
and speak the language of the culture without obviously becoming crass, crude, or anything like that. So I think to me that was one of the things I was nervous about for sure, the front end.
Well, and one thing too, because you talk a lot about the events that you guys have been a part of in Fort St. John, like Party in the Park, Canada Day stuff, Party in the Parka, Christmas time. That was an awesome one. I remember the first one you guys did. We actually able to block off the street. We had a huge bonfire and live music and stuff like that, which was awesome. Candy Planet on Halloween.
Yeah.
That was a huge hit. So I mean, it's really great to read the book and understand that, how important the leadership role in the church, or the pastoral role, is not just about prepping sermon, preaching sermon, but being engaged in the community, understanding the community, and reaching out in that way. So
yeah, well, I think the church has a ton to bring to a city setting, beyond the Sunday gathering. Interestingly, in the season we're in, there is no Sunday gathering.
Yeah,
and so I was thinking about the book actually because I knew you were going to bring it up or whatever. But what was written to like the pastor of the church, that was kind of the target. Now everybody is anybody who was going to evangel 2 months ago is now pastoring their own church in their home,
right?
Because there is no gathering.
Yep.
So I feel like a lot of the principles in the book actually are even more relevant now because of this fact that there's so many people having to kind of do self-leadership in some ways. So it's kind of exciting.
So last question: favorite section or part of the book?
The first part of the book is about the small town, so I think anybody can connect to that. We, my wife and I, our family, we love the small town. We believe in the small town. I think we could arguably be some of Fort St. John's biggest fans, and the small town living. So the first part of the book deals with that, and then the second part of the book deals with the small town church. And there's a piece in there where I talk about just being cool. And I just think as a pastor in a small town, usually you don't have a youth pastor. You don't have a big budget. You can't hire staff.
Right.
But yet the way forward for the church or any organization is you got to engage the younger culture. And so I do a little bit of a chapter there on just helping pastors hack their way into being cool, which goes. I think
I actually just read through that section. There's some good stuff in there.
It's so, I mean, what kind of music to listen to? I mean, I kind of jokingly say the most uncool music out there is Southern Gospel and Southern Gospel and Southern Gospel. And for most pastors my age, the hack to being cool is 80s rock and roll, because we all know 80s rock and roll. And there's just some things we can do, but I actually think it's imperative. It's not really optional for the church to thrive. It has to engage the younger crowd. So that means that solo guy pastoring a church of 50 has to learn how to be cool. I mean, go out and get a new wardrobe or do whatever you have to do. And fake your way into it. And don't let anybody know you're trying. You can't try too hard, or that blows your cover and you're done or whatever. But I think I kind of had fun with that. It's the chapter title is called "Be a Youth Pastor," and it was directed at senior guys.
Well, and I just love how chock full of info it is. Like, there's not a lot of fluff and run-on sentences and things like that don't need to be in there. There's lots of bullet point formatting and things like that. So it's easy to read, but it's easy to grasp the themes that you're trying to get out of there. So
and I appreciate that.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you, Tony, for joining us today. That was a really fun chat. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.